to paradise, where everything is nice. You take me to very, 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 very paradise. Take me to paradise, where everything is nice. You take me to very, 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 very paradise.
Welcome to Stitch and Stillness. Here in Emz Universe, where we learn to crochet slowly, creatively, and one stitch at a time. If you enjoy slow learning and intentional creativity, make sure to subscribe and join the community. Now that we've looked at the basic crochet tools in the previous episode, the next step is understanding yarn. So yarn comes in different fibers and different weights, and both of these can affect how your crochet project will look and feel. So when we talk about yarn weight, we're not talking about how heavy the yarn feels, we're talking about how thick the yarn strand is. Now, some yarns will be very thin and delicate, and others will be much thicker and work up a lot more quickly. Most yarn brands will use a number system from 0 to 7 to describe yarn thickness, which I'll walk you through each weight so you can start to recognize them when choosing yarn for a project. So, before we look at yarn weights, it's also helpful to understand that yarn can be made from different fibers. Now, some of the most common fibers you'll see are acrylic. So an example of an acrylic yarn will be this one. This one's made out of tencel. And with acrylic yarns, they're typically made out of a synthetic fiber. And it's a very beginner friendly, very affordable, and very widely available and very easy to care for. Now, the second type of fiber that is common is also cotton yarn. So an example of a cotton yarn that I have is this one. And with cotton yarn, it's made from natural plant fibers. It has very little stretch and is great for projects like bags, dishcloths, or summer garments. And the third common fiber that you'll typically see is wool. So I've got an example of a nice squishy wool yarn here. So typically with wool, it comes from sheep's fleece, and it's super warm, super soft, and very slightly stretchy, which makes it really great for scarves, hats, and winter clothing. And as a beginner, many people find that acrylic yarns or soft wool blends are the easiest yarns to practice with. When I started off using wool blends, so that's typically what I would opt for when you're starting out as well. But again, find your own flow and see what works best for you. So now we're going to move on to talking about yarn weights, which are typically numbered from 0 to 7. So the thinnest yarn you'll see is called lace weight yarn, which is sometimes called a 0 weight yarn. In UK terms, you may hear this described as a very fine lace yarn. I don't have a physical example of that yarn with me, so I will put a picture up on the screen so you can see exactly what it looks like. But this yarn is extremely thin and delicate, and it's usually used for very detailed crochet work like lace shawls or decorative pieces. Because the yarn is so fine, it can be a little tricky for beginners to work with, so I would avoid using this yarn when you're starting out. The next yarn weight is number 1, which is also referred to as a super fine yarn, but this can also be known as fingering weight in the US. And in the UK, it's often called a 4-ply yarn. So an example of a 4-ply yarn looks a little bit something like this. So as you'll see, this yarn is still quite thin in weight, but it's slightly thicker than lace weight. And it's commonly used for projects like socks, lightweight garments, and baby items. Again, due to the weight of this particular yarn, I would avoid using this when you're starting out as a beginner crocheter. Now, the next yarn weight is yarn weight number 2, which is categorized as fine yarn, and it's often called sport weight yarn in the US. In the UK, it's sometimes referred to as a 5-ply yarn. Again, I don't have a physical example of this yarn, so I'm gonna put a picture on the screen so you can see what it looks like. But this yarn is still fairly light, but easier to work with than the previous 2 weights. And it's often used for baby clothes, lightweight garments, and small accessories. Next weight is yarn weight number 3, which is categorized under light yarn, and it's also known as DK yarn, which stands for double knit. This is a very popular yarn weight, especially in the UK. And I do have an example of a DK yarn. So as you'll see here, the weight of this yarn is slightly thicker than sport weight, but still light enough for detailed projects. And DK yarn is great for things like scarves, baby blankets, garments, and accessories. And many beginners enjoy using it because the stitches are easy to use. Now you can have many different textures of yarns within the same category. Obviously, as you can see, this yarn looks a bit like paper because it's literally made out of paper. I wouldn't recommend using this to make garments, but it is really good for making accessories like summery bags or coasters or placemats. Plate mats, should I say, or just light kind of summer jewelry. The next weight is yarn weight 4, which is often called a medium yarn, and is often called a worsted weight yarn in the US. In the UK, it's very similar to Aran yarn. So some examples of Aran yarn I've got here is the Shiny Happy Cotton yarn from Wool and the Gang, and Feeling Good yarn from Wool and the Gang as well. So this is one of the most common yarn weights, and it's excellent for beginners. As you'll see, the yarn weight is still typically quite thin in size, but it's still thick enough that the stitches are easy to see, but it's not too thick that it feels too bulky. If you also look at the weight of the Feeling Good, it has an exact similar kind of thickness and weight to it. This yarn works really, really well for projects like scarves, hats, blankets, and simple garments. And honestly, like, these are 2 of my favorite yarns to work with. Like, this is my favorite cotton yarn to work with. This is so soft and so squidgy and feels so nice on the skin. Definitely recommend as you continue your crocheting journey. Next yarn weight is yarn weight number 5, which we typically refer to as a bulky yarn, which is a lot thicker and works up much easier. So an example of a bulky yarn I've got here is the Al Pacino Merino yarn from Wool and the Gang. As you'll see, it's has a slightly more thicker weight to it than the previous yarn. But bulky yarn is really, really great for cozy projects like chunky scarves, hats, and blankets. Because it's a lot thicker, you can see your stitches clearly and projects grow really, really quickly. Again, this is one of my favorite yarns to work with. It's super, super squidgy, super soft. And if you're like me, I've got very sensitive skin. It doesn't feel scratchy against my skin. It feels very soft and very nice. So yeah, as you continue crocheting, I definitely recommend this yarn. Maybe not to start out with because it is slightly on the more premium side, but once you're a bit more confident in your journey and once you want like more of a long-term yarn, I definitely recommend using a bulky weight yarn. Doesn't have to be from Wool and the Gang, it could be from another brand, but yeah, bulky yarn's definitely the way to go. And then the next yarn weight is yarn weight number 6, which is a super bulky yarn. So some examples of some super bulky yarns I have here is the Jersey Be Good yarn from Wool and the Gang, which is made out of t-shirt cotton, and the mixtape yarn also from Wool and the Gang, which looks like shoelace string. So as you'll notice here with the super bulky yarn, the yarn is very thick, so you'll see the weight of the yarn is a lot more thicker in comparison to the others. And it works up very quickly using large crochet hooks. Similarly, if we have a look at the mixtape yarn, as you can see here, the weight of the yarn is a lot more thicker in comparison to the other weights. These types of yarns are often used for chunky blankets, oversized scarves, and statement pieces. These particular ones I wouldn't use for scarves, but they are perfect for accessories, so like plant holders, bags. This works up really well for tote bags or bum bags, and so does this yarn as well. And they do work really well actually for statement jewelry. So if you want to make like nice necklaces, this cord material is very sturdy. So I would recommend those. But when you're just practicing, I think these are really good yarns to also work with. And then lastly, the final weight is yarn weight 7, which is typically categorized as a jumbo yarn. I'll put a picture up of this because I don't have a physical example of it. So I'll put a picture on the screen so you can see what it looks like. But this yarn is extremely thick, and sometimes it is used for arm knitting or very chunky blankets. Because the yarn is so large, projects grow very quickly. The best yarn weight that I would recommend for beginners when you're starting out, typically we'd recommend a DK yarn, so something like this, or an Aran or worsted yarn, so something like this. But I would also throw a chunky yarn into the mix as well. The reason why I would recommend opting for these particular types of yarns is because these yarns are thick enough that you can clearly see your stitches, which makes learning a lot easier, and they're typically a lot more forgiving if you do make any mistakes and you need to unravel your yarn. Now, before we start crocheting, let's look at how to hold your crochet hook comfortably. So I've got a 10mm crochet hook here that I'm going to use as an example. So there are two common ways people hold a crochet hook. The first is called the pencil grip, where you hold the hook the same way you would hold a pencil. So typically if you hold it using the pencil grip method, you'd be holding your crochet hook like this. So as you can see, you've got your two fingers gripping the crochet hook at the top, and it sits in between those two and then kind of balances at the top of your remaining fingers. So think about if you was writing a pencil, it's the same type of way that you would hold it. And similarly, if you're left-handed, it would be the exact same way as well. So you'd grip it at the top and think about, if you're writing, that's the exact kind of motion that you would use when you're holding the crochet hook. So that's the pencil grip method. And then the second is called the knife grip. So the knife grip method, so you'd hold it like you would do a knife. So that's where the hook sits in your hands, similar to how you would hold a knife when cutting food. So as you can see with the knife hook method, your hands, your two fingers kind of grip at the front of the crochet hook like this, and the crochet hook sits between your hands. So in some instances, you may grip at the front like this and have your fingers sitting downwards, or you may just completely curl all fingers around the hook and grip it exactly like you would do if you was holding a knife handle. And you would follow the exact same method if you were left-handed. So you'd grip it with two fingers at the front. It would sit in between your other fingers, and you would grip it like this and hold it like this as if you were cutting food. So neither the pencil grip or the knife grip is right or wrong. It's really just about choosing the one that feels the most comfortable for you. Me personally, I can't hold my crochet hook like this. I can't hold it like this. This is very uncomfortable for me. I use the knife grip method. I find that sits a lot more comfortable for me. So that's the only method that I use. But yeah, have a play around with both and see which one fits you best. So now let's look at how to hold your yarn. So as you crochet, your yarn needs a little bit of tension, which helps control how the stitches form. So a simple way to hold your yarn is to wrap it gently over your fingers so it can slide smoothly whilst you work. So an example of this will be, you can either let it sit over all of your fingers like this. You can let it sit over one finger like this and create a large loop. So when you're working, the yarn can easily pull through your fingers. Or you can have it lay across two fingers like this. So you can have it sit across two fingers, and you can have it sit in between, just under the third finger. So that way when you're pulling your yarn, it can still glide, but it's still controlled slightly by the pressure of the third finger kind of holding it in place. But it's about allowing space for your yarn to pull comfortably across your fingers. Now, if you are placing it across your fingers like this, but you press your third finger down very tight and don't allow space, you'll see as you try to pull, it's going to be very difficult for it to glide. So it's you need to make sure that you're kind of letting your fingers leave some space so that the yarn can just glide through your fingers. If you're right-handed, when you have your crochet hook, you'll find as well that your yarn will either sit comfortably over your finger like this and gradually glide through, or you can have it sit across both fingers like this, and again repeat the same technique of having the third finger keep it controlled on the other side, and that way you can gradually just slide the yarn through as you work. So you don't want to hold it too tightly, otherwise it will restrict the movement of the yarn. So the yarn should be able to move comfortably through your fingers. I'll just show you that again. So once you've got it positioned across your fingers and you've left a little bit of space for it to glide through, the yarn should be able to comfortably move through your fingers. Again, if you hold it really tight like this, you'll see it kind of, it can still move, but it has a slightly more restriction to it. So as you practice, your hands will naturally find a rhythm that feels comfortable for you. So with whichever yarn you decide to use, I would just practice holding it across your fingers and gradually just gliding it across your fingers and just getting used to the sensation and feeling of the yarn gliding across your fingers. Practice makes perfect, right? So at first it may feel a bit tricky, but the more you do it, the more easier it will be for your yarn to glide and move across your fingers. So now that we've explored the different types of yarn and how to hold your yarn and crochet hook comfortably, we're ready to start learning the foundations of crochet. In the next lesson, we'll look at gauge and tension and how they affect the size and consistency of your stitches. Thank you for stitching with me today. I really hope that you found this lesson informative and useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And that wraps up today's lesson. Thank you so much for stitching with me. If you enjoyed today's lesson and you want to continue learning with Stitch and Stillness, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Always remember to take your time, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next stitch. Bye.